Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old 4th Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
All right, and a happy weekend to you. Thanks for listening, whether it's on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, on demand at ProgressiveVoices.com, whether you're listening to Progressive Voices this weekend via TuneIn or via podcast. Thank you for tuning in. My guest later in the show will be Dom Kelly. He's the co-founder, president, and CEO of the New Disabled South. It is a 501c3 nonprofit organization and its 501c4 arm, New Disabled South Rising. He is also a Jewish American citizen, and we've had him on a few times to discuss issues that pertain to the rights of disabled Americans. And he has a lot to say about what is happening across college campuses here. We, of course, got a taste of that last night, or actually all day yesterday, on the campus of Emory University. Let me give you that story right now from WXIA-TV, 11 Alive.
Tonight, hundreds of protesters gathered on the Emory University campus today, some holding pro-Palestinian signs.
And others are protesting against the Atlanta Public Safety Training Facility. We want to get straight out to 11 Alive's Brittany Klein-Peter, who's been down at that campus all day for us. Brittany, we've seen these images play out over social media, online. Can you explain what exactly happened there?
Good evening, Faith and Jennifer. So the best way I can describe what was going on here today was like a pot of boiling water just ready to boil over. We are right near where this all unfolded, but it happened early this morning and it's gone on all day since.
Palestine will be free! Palestine will be free! Every city is our city!
From classes to campus tours.
And I pleaded really with the administration not to cancel the tour, as did other moms in the room.
Everything came to a stop on Emory University's campus.
There was a moment where I got really just frozen.
As things came to a head. It all began when an encampment appeared on campus early Thursday, similar to what's been seen at other colleges across the nation. But protesters were not only protesting the Hamas-Israel war, but some were also protesting Atlanta's future public safety training site. Atlanta police say they were called out to the campus at the request of university officials. Multiple people were taken away in handcuffs. At one point, a state representative even showed up.
I'm honestly down here out of sincere concern because as soon as I realized this was turning violent, I wanted to see what was going on and see if there's a way to de-escalate.
And as tensions remain high, tonight, some students say they feel uneasy.
It doesn't feel like a safe place for students. It doesn't feel like I should be here.
This will definitely make some waves, whether or not it's positive or negative.
There's hostility, there's violence towards tons of different groups right now, regardless of really any affiliation. It just feels like tensions are about to boil over and it doesn't feel safe for anyone.
And as I mentioned earlier, the protests have continued throughout today, still going on right now, but they have remained relatively calm since this morning. There is still a police presence on campus, but nothing too significant. APD did confirm that both students and non-students were involved in today's events. Reporting in DeKalb County, Brittany Klein-Peter, 11 Alive News.
And from Emory University's Vice President of Public Safety, Cheryl Elliott, a statement that went out to Emory University students and faculty and maybe even alumni. Dear Emory community, I'm willing to share further information about the events that took place on our Atlanta campus earlier today and the actions taken by the Emory Police Department, also known as EPD. At 7:41 a.m., a few dozen protesters arrived on campus. When they arrived, these individuals ignored and pushed past EPD officers stationed on the quad and set up tents in an area where equipment and materials were staged for commencement. Based on their actions and refusal to confirm their connection to Emory, EPD made the assessment that these individuals were not Emory community members. Officers with the Atlanta Police Department and Georgia State Patrol were then called to provide further assistance. Around this time, several social media accounts announced a protest and occupation of the quad and issued a public call for non-Emory community members to join them. EPD issued multiple warnings at different intervals advising individuals in the encampment that they were trespassing on private property and instructing them to leave. When those requests were ignored, Atlanta Police and Georgia State Patrol officers assisted EPD with dispersing the crowd and taking individuals into custody for criminal trespass. During this process and the subsequent confrontations, Objects were thrown at police officers. To our knowledge at this time, an individual attacked a non-EPD officer and appears to have been tased. Video of this incident has been widely shared on social media. Based on current information, this individual is not a member of the Emory community. Due to the direct assault of officers, law enforcement released chemical irritants, tear gas, into the crowd to assist with crowd control. Here's how far I've gotten into this statement before you get this. As of this message, we have been notified that 28 individuals have been arrested, including 20 Emory community members, some of whom have been released. 20 of the 28 arrested, Emory community members. We're working with responding agencies to expedite the release of any Emory community members who remain in custody. Our primary goal today was clearing the quad of a disruptive encampment while holding individuals accountable to the law. That again from Cheryl Elliott, the Vice President of Public Safety for Emory University. Among those arrested, Emory professor Carolyn Folan. Listen to this exchange.
People are fascists. You are Hitler. You are a laughing dog. Shame on you. May you never live another day. I am a professor. This is an Emory professor, everyone. I am a professor of economics. You are rabid dogs. You are fascists.
It was a peaceful protest until they started fighting troopers. I agree with you.
L-I-N. I reacted impulsively. I apologize.
No, you're right. It's right to rebel. I'm going to share this.
Please remove the handcuffs.
Professor Folan was there to basically try and intervene as she saw a young person on the ground, and I can't speak for her. Maybe she thought that police were being a little too physical. It's hard to say. She was trying to intervene, and one of the officers took attention to her right away. Again, Professor Folan is a pretty slight, slender woman. The officer that turned to pay some attention to her and then subsequently wrestles her to the ground, hitting her head against concrete sidewalk, by the way, losing her glasses, nearly crushing them. A bit of a bigger person than she was. And he had another officer come assist him. Professor Folan wasn't the only Emory faculty member arrested. Philosophy chair Noel McAfee was arrested as well. Here's a little bit of some audio of her being detained.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. Is there anything I can do for you right now?
Yes, can you call the philosophy department office and tell them I've been arrested?
Philosophy department?
Yes, call the philosophy department office.
I will. What's your...
Noel McAfee, I'm chair of the philosophy department.
I got you.
President-elect.
I got you.
No idea why she was arrested. Not even going to speculate. But again, this goes to point at, as Emory's own vice president of public safety points out, 20 of the 28 arrested yesterday were of the Emory community, whether it be students, faculty, employees, et cetera, so on. Now, I'm going to take a little bit of a contrarian point of view as well and say that if I'm reading correctly from the vice president of public safety statement, Emory PD asked anyone who was setting up 7:41 a.m. yesterday, the protesters. Let me get back to that line. Based on their actions and refusal to confirm their connection to Emory, EPD made the assessment that these individuals were not Emory community members. Without brandishing an ID, student ID, faculty ID, any ID at all, Emory police had no other conclusion to make, or that's the conclusion they chose to make. Okay, either way, when you don't confirm your identity as an Emory student or faculty member or someone on the Emory staff, custodial, et cetera, so on, then EPD has no confirmation that you belong on the campus. And the campus is private property, after all. If you're not a student, you're not there to do business or working there, you don't necessarily have the right to just be there. Now, as you heard in the 11 Alive piece I played for you earlier, Georgia Representative Rua Roman, friend of the show, she's been on the show a couple times, was there hoping, she said, to sort of tampen down the hostilities as best as possible. Representative Esther Penich, according to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, also showed up a little bit later, not on campus, but to aid in a counter-protest as opposing groups showed up directly across the street from one another near the Emory campus. Carolyn Silva at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reporting that simultaneous gatherings were held at Emory on Thursday evening, hours after an encampment on campus led to clashes with responding officers and multiple arrests. A small group of Jewish students, local residents, and officials stood outside Ali's Cookies at Emory Village at 7 p.m. for a Passover gathering and to show support for the Jewish community. And we get down to where on the other side, that's where State Representative Esther Penich, by the way, showed up to lend her support. Across the street from Ali's Cookies, Zoa Muhammad's father yelled for a ceasefire and an end to the genocide. Muhammad said the two of them were on their way to the quad for a protest that began around 6 p.m., but ran into those gathered outside the cookie shop. They decided to stick around, stating that their efforts were more effective than on campus. Muhammad said her father's goal was to show those outside Ali's and those driving down the street the other side of the story. She said, "It's not about your religion. It's not about what country you're from. It's not even about your ethnicity. Are you human? Yes. Do you want to see a woman or a baby, a one-day-old baby, die? Do you support that? No. So you're on Palestine's side," she said. The article goes on to point out that more than 200 people gathered at the protest on campus that Muhammad was on her way to. Like earlier in the day, the crowd was a mixture of Emory students and people with no affiliation to the university. Police presence was significantly heavier on campus, with a line of troopers standing in front of the Candler School of Theology building and later surrounding the quad as protesters stood in a circle in front of the half-built commencement stage. Stephanie Kohler, who came to campus to stand alongside the students, said she doesn't think they should have to speak up in isolation. Though the crowd was chanting and beating drums throughout the evening, Kohler said the protest was peaceful. "I felt completely safe all afternoon, and the only thing that's made me uncomfortable is that there was a police perimeter over here, and there was a helicopter going for a while. It just felt like there was a heavy-handed intimidation." All right, we've got a lot more on that, and more House protests with the president coming to speak at their commencement as well when the Ron Show returns on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, or wherever you podcast. Follow along on your preferred social media platform. That would be at Ron Show ATL, Twitter, X, Instagram, for the memes mostly. Facebook as well. I'll give you the daily link to the podcast if you want to listen to it in its entirety. Say you missed some of it, that's fine. You can jump in wherever you like, obviously by listening between 9 to 10 a.m. and 5 to 6 p.m. on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, or the entire thing via podcast or on demand at ProgressiveVoices.com. So while we're watching these protests happen, not just on the Emory University campus, but throughout the country, right-wing media is having a field day with this sort of stuff. Eric Erickson tweeting, "Those of you appalled by what is happening on these Ivy League campuses have the power to change it by refusing to hire anyone from the Ivy League." The problem is it's not just happening on Ivy League campuses, Eric. The University of Southern California canceling its graduation ceremonies. That is the same graduating class that didn't get to enjoy the usual graduation ceremonies at the high school level as well. Rather unfortunate that this has to be. But this isn't just happening on Ivy League campuses. Again, USC, Emory University. There are dozens of campuses throughout the country where these protests are springing forth. And also, Eric, can you just blanket discriminate people who proliferate, I don't know, their social media feed with clips and op-ed and fluff pieces from right-wing channels, sites, and pundits too? It's just wondering if we're going to blanket discriminate against people. Why don't we just give that a shot too? They would scream bloody murder. Also, this is the same right-wing media that was howling with indignation if someone like an Ann Coulter wanted to go speak at a college campus and protest shut her down. I mean, if you want free speech, For Ann Coulter on campus, why wouldn't you want free speech when it discomforts you? I'm fairly certain Eric Erickson doesn't have a problem with Morehouse University faculty and students raising some concerns about President Joe Biden's planned addressing the commencement happening at that campus as well. NBC News reporting. This is Namandi Igwanwu and Blaine Alexander reporting on Morehouse's strife, weighing this from an optics point of view. Commencement season, traditionally a time for presidents to engage with younger audiences and all the energy they bring, but this year with pro-Palestinian protests and protests against Biden's support for Israel dominating college campuses, these speeches are more fraught. The White House announced this week that Biden will be doing just 2 commencement addresses this year at Morehouse and the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. So, they held a conference yesterday on the Morehouse campus. Here's a little bit of an exchange with a student and the Morehouse president.
Right now, I'm being told that we need to use our platform as Morehouse men. Why are we using it to support someone who hasn't been supporting Palestine and Gaza and things like that? How are we being global cosmopolitan citizens? What precedent does that set for freshmen?
There's a possibility of a genocide happening. And we're seeing our government continually sending more and more weapons, 2,000-pound bombs that are being dropped on whole neighborhoods, schools being destroyed, hospitals being destroyed.
You condemn what's happening, man. Children is dying, innocent people being blown up, and you can see the videos and you can't deny the videos. And we don't condemn that. You say, well, the world might not see it as, oh, we complicit. You know, we see it as we complicit. We the students telling you we see it as that's being complicit. Do y'all see that as complicit?
Yes, sir.
Yes. That's complicit. That's complicit in genocide. Do you think it's a genocide or not? Let me just ask a question everybody wants to hear. Do you think it's a genocide or do you not think it's a genocide what's happening in Gaza? Simple yes or no. That's all I want. Yes or no. Is it a genocide or not? Of your personal professional opinion, as an educator, as a man of this country, what do you think? Are the people of Gaza being genocided or are they not?
I'm not going to answer that question.
Morehouse professor, back to the article from NBC News. Morehouse professor Andrew Douglas said many students and faculty are wrestling with whether or how to protest next month's commencement, saying, I've spoken with several faculty members who say under no conditions are they going to sit on a stage with Joe Biden, adding it's on everybody's mind. Douglas, a political science professor in his 12th year at Morehouse, is a member of the school's faculty council, the 15-member body that wrote a letter to the school's president last week expressing disappointment upon hearing rumors that Biden had been invited to speak. After those concerns came out, Morehouse leadership decided to hold its call with faculty members, though officials have made clear Biden's invitation will be rescinded. This was a decision that should have included more members of the campus community, students and faculty, Douglas said. And if those conversations had happened, I'm not sure that the decision to move forward would have been made. He pointed to what he called very serious and widespread concerns over the war in Gaza, arguing that, quote, the Biden administration has had a hand in 7 months of death and destruction in ways that we don't condone or support. On Wednesday, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre responded to the backlash, telling reporters that commencements were meant to focus on the graduates and their families. Pierre saying it's not the first time, obviously, that he's given commencement speeches. I understand this is a different moment in time that we're in, but he always takes this moment as a special time to deliver a message, an encouraging message, a message that's hopefully uplifting to the graduates and their families. And we're going to continue to have these conversations that I've just mentioned with the different communities about what's happening right now. We get it. It's painful. The article from NBC continues. Calvin Bell, a senior at Morehouse who voted for Biden in 2020, has similar concerns. While he described Biden's speech as a distraction from celebrating students during commencement, he also sees the visit as a chance to take student concerns over Gaza directly to the president. Calvin saying, this is also an opportunity for students to make their voices heard during a time of increasing war and genocide in the Middle East. While Douglas acknowledged the call with leadership is unlikely to result in Biden's speech being canceled, Douglas says the priority among faculty is to protect students' rights to protest, noting that a protest at Morehouse, the nation's only college dedicated to educating black men, could bring a different risk than similar protests at other campuses across the country. Our priority should be, he says, to try and ensure that under no circumstances are the police brought to bear on our students. Our students do not have the same privilege that Ivy League students typically do, and confrontations with the police can turn deadly for our students. I mean, what a pickle, right? The president, in a year he's running for re-election, seeing degradation within, at least polling, from African-American male voters, is set to give a speech at MLK's alma mater, a school exclusively for black men, and there's no way to avoid what's going to be the awkward optics when you can assume there's going to be some sign or audible sign of protest. As the article concludes, but while commencement is still a month away, enough time for minds to change, Douglas said the early signs do not point to a warm welcome. I have not had a conversation with a student who is happy about this. Back to discuss all of this is my guest, Dom Kelly, CEO of New Disabled South and New Disabled South Rising, when the Ron Show returns on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, wherever you podcast, and at ProgressiveVoices.com.
Archived audio, blogs, social media links, and more, all in one place. Log on at RonShowATL.com. The Ron Show on America One Radio.
So much going on in the world. It feels like we're at this snapshot in time that maybe we'll look back 25, 50 years ago. Oh, man, what a moment that was and what a pivot. And hopefully we make a pivot for the right. But nonetheless, we've got a lot to talk about. And joining me is Dom Kelly, CEO, founder of New Disabled South and New Disabled South Rising. He also goes by on the Twitter X platform, the Tattooed Jew. I love that moniker, man. And we haven't talked about your tattoos. I don't have one on me. But we'll save that for another conversation when we can be a little bit more lighthearted. There's just so much to go over. And when we decided we were going to converse yesterday morning, we didn't know the Emory stuff was going to blow up, but the Emory stuff blew up. So your initial thoughts on what happened on the Emory campus yesterday?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm sadly not surprised by what happened based on what's going on across this country. I think clearly we had peaceful demonstration of students and faculty, and we saw an example of Brian Kemp and Andre Dickens and the militarization of our police that they have promoted, and as a result, this is what happens. I think it was a disgusting response. I think we have seen people try to paint the protests as anti-Semitic when that's not at all what's happened. And watching videos of students and faculty be brutalized by police in riot gear, and who used tear gas and rubber bullets and tasers is just it's just obscene and completely unacceptable. So I think it is, and clearly directly tied to what we're seeing with the repression of Stop Cop City activists.
I was just going to say there's this correlation that seems to run in parallels here, where you've got these student protests, and as many have reported, there were also anti-Cop City protesters who were showing up as well, or actually being called to show up as well. And so the thing I wanted to point out was, like, on the one hand, Emory police wanted those who were on the campus to identify themselves as at least being allowed to be on the campus. And obviously, apparently, the 28 arrested anyway didn't want to do that. So Emory police had no choice but to consider them to be not allowed to be on campus. And so I kind of understand where Emory PD's hands are tied a little bit, but at the same time, this just sort of encapsulate the reason why there is a push to negate the Atlanta Public Safety Training Facility being built in the first place, if this is how police is going to respond to a peaceful protest. There had been no violence. There was no one throwing anything. There was, to my knowledge, I heard no reporting of any epithets being hurled at anybody or violent rhetoric or anything of that sort.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. And I mean, already within moments, we saw Chris Carr, Attorney General, come out and try to say that there were anti-Semitic threats being made, which there's zero evidence of. So clearly, this was also a coordinated political response. as well. And I think it just, you're right. It really goes to show, exactly the connection to the militarization of the police here in Atlanta and Georgia.
Also, as you pointed out, there are actually protesters who gather for these pro-Palestinian, anti-war movements who, get this, are actually Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's right.
why is that not more well known? I mean, I follow organizations like JVP, Jewish Voices for Peace, and I see how much of a presence they have at these things. But in fact, a lot of the people that I follow on social media through this show, Marissa Pyle, yourself, among others, are Jewish Americans who are very much against the war in Gaza.
Yeah. I think that unfortunately, what's happened is that in mainstream Jewish spaces, groups like JVP have been demonized and lied about. Even just, I think it was just maybe yesterday or the last couple of days, Jonathan Greenblatt from the Anti-Defamation League said that JVP was funded by Iran. I mean, it's just a lie, right? But that's the narrative that we hear all the time about groups like JVP in mainstream Jewish spaces. So unfortunately, those of us who are active in groups like JVP get demonized by mainstream Jews and right-wing folks and moderate Democrats, and so I think that's why you don't hear about that, because it's not we have been demonized, and we are not wholly accepted in many of those kind of mainstream Jewish spaces.
So let's talk about this from a macro level. You have these protests brimming, and you have obviously the strong-handed responses that are happening at Columbia University or here at Emory University, University of Southern California, canceling their graduation ceremonies out of, I guess, a perceived fear of some sort. Despite, again, there being no evidence of violence or violent rhetoric aimed at any student or anything like that. And then, just last week, the White House is celebrating because the Speaker of the House capitulates and lets forth a vote on funding for Taiwan and Ukraine and Israel and ties it to a TikTok ban. None of this looks good that the White House would be enjoying. None of this looks good for the under 30 voter that is on the fence about voting. Not necessarily that they may show up and vote for Donald Trump, but showing up to vote at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just had this conversation last night in the car with a friend that it really seems like the Biden administration is doing everything to lose at this point. It's what I am hearing from especially young voters is they don't feel a need to go out and vote. Not only are they not seeing their lives improve under Biden, but they're not seeing they're seeing these things like a TikTok ban in the midst of a genocide, and they're seeing the Biden administration stand behind and fund a genocide, and now with the protests, I mean, this is just an example of it is adding fuel to the fire, and so I really am worried that we're not going to have a bunch of people voting for Trump. We're just not going to have people show up to the polls. And I think that what I keep seeing around this TikTok ban too is the hypocrisy of the Biden administration going after TikTok and saying they're going to use TikTok.
Yeah, exactly. On
campaign.
TikTok. Yeah. On TikTok, enjoying ice cream. Yeah. So here's the thing. We're with Dom Kelly, who's the CEO of New Disabled South Rising. You're a smart man. You're a smart guy, and I think you understand the political nuance and the discomforting position that I think the Biden White House is in, though. So you and I can flesh this out. We can talk about a TikTok ban, and I think understand the rationale behind pushing for TikTok to divest itself in the United States to someone else. Yeah. We can agree on that, right? We can understand that there are security implications involved.
Absolutely. Do I think that the average voter is going to understand that?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. They're going to see President Biden signed this law, and he's going to ban TikTok, and that's all they see.
Yeah.
They don't understand the nuance, and that is another reason not to vote.
So, is it an issue of messaging? What has to happen for the White House to explain this in a way that I think the younger voter will kind of understand what their goal is here?
I think it's messaging. I mean, honestly, I think they should never have tried to do this in an election year in the first place. So I truly don't know how you repair the damage when, sure, you can message all you want about the why, but at this point, what's done is done, and the narrative is Biden is banning TikTok, and that's all people hear. So I actually don't know how you repair this, except to try to message differently. But again, all people see is the hypocrisy, and all people see are the headlines.
So when you see the TikTok ban tied to the aid package for Ukraine, for Taiwan, for Israel, I spoke with Andrew Heaton, a political consultant, yesterday, and I almost surmised that, we look at the Republican House as like this cast of clowns that don't seem to know how to get out of their own way. But to me, there's something almost kind of savvy about this. I almost feel like that this was like a ticking time bomb that they put in the Trojan horse and wheeled it into the gates at the same time. Does it not in some facets look like this, or was this just a happenstance situation? Did they just trip into this? What are your thoughts?
No, I don't think they just trip into it. I think this is very, very calculated and thought out. And unfortunately, while some may agree with aid to Ukraine or some may agree with aid to Taiwan, again, what most people are seeing is the Biden administration is sending money to Israel, and that money is going to enacting a genocide against Palestinian people. And so that's what people see, that's what they hear, and they're not going to understand the nuance behind that, and understandably, because we don't want money going to Israel. But I do think it's planned. I do think it is strategy, and unfortunately, I think it's the policy of the Biden administration. I think it's a bad policy, but I think it's a policy, and one that they clearly are standing behind.
So, as CEO of New Disabled South Rising, there are obviously political issues that are at the forefront in the 2024 cycle. Primary season, we're just coming weeks away from that, and then we get into the general election. What are the issues that you are trying to get politicians to take up on their mantle as they move forward with their messaging?
Yeah, so this election cycle, we're really focusing on access to care, and that's healthcare, that's childcare, that's home care. Polling has showed that this is an issue that the majority of voters really care about. People can't afford childcare. People are waiting for care in their homes instead of waiting, languishing in nursing homes or institutions. And so this is the kind of messaging and the issue that we're really focusing on. We're not necessarily endorsing or standing behind any particular candidate in this election, but really focusing on the issues. And so that is a big issue that we're working on. We're also really just trying to educate voters about the barriers. Disabled voters face barriers to voting disproportionately to really any other group of voters, especially if you're a disabled voter of color. And because the laws have changed so much since 2020, we're really trying to make sure folks are educated and have the information they need to vote if they choose to vote. Our messaging is not, this is the most important election of our lifetime and you have to vote. People are tired of hearing that. Our messaging is, here are the issues that impact your life. This is why you being a part of this is why you engaging civically will help you in the long run, and here's the information you need should you choose to vote. And that's kind of how we're focusing on that messaging this election cycle.
So enlighten me and my audience on some of the barriers that exist for disabled American voters and disabled American voters of color that you spoke of earlier.
Yeah, I mean, there are many. As you know, here in Georgia, we have seen long lines at polling places. That is definitely a disability issue, and mainly happens in black and brown communities. We have seen the criminalization of voter assistance in multiple states across the South, particularly. It's now a felony in Alabama to assist a voter with voting absentee. It's also, there's like multiple bills in Louisiana trying to do the same thing. So that is a big issue we're seeing right now. We also saw in Georgia, it's now a felony for elections administrators to accept private funding, which most of that kind of private funding, foundation funding, has historically gone to make polling places accessible for disabled voters. And because polling places and elections are so underfunded now, we're probably going to see polling places close across Georgia as a result. And like what Brian Kemp did in 2018, when he tried to close 7 out of 9 polling places in Randolph County, he said that it was because they were inaccessible. And really, it was because Randolph County is primarily black, and we're probably going to see the same thing this year. Polling places close using the inaccessible excuse, using the ADA, when really it is the result of underfunding. And so those are just a few examples, but only 16% of polling places in this country are accessible for disabled voters. And that's with the ADA, that's with all of the legislation that we have, the laws of the land that are supposed to make voting accessible. So yeah, we've got a long way to go.
Final segment of the Ron Show. We are in the home stretch, and we're with Dom Kelly, the CEO of New Disabled South, New Disabled South Rising. We were talking about access to voting for disabled voters and disabled voters of color. Is it just a gentleman's agreement that if you see someone who has an issue with access, that we get out of the way or we let them to the front of the line, or is there any sort of protocol for that? I was just curious. I didn't know if there was such a thing in the state of Georgia.
Yeah, well, in the state of Georgia, the law says that if you are disabled, you can go to the front of a long line, except only between the hours of 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. That is not a joke. That is exactly what the law says, and there are signs at polling places that actually say that. So technically, if you go to vote before 9 a.m. or after 5 p.m., you are not entitled to go to the front of the line if there's a line. I don't know why that arbitrary decision to make it between 9 and 5. Apparently, disabled people don't vote before or after 9 or 5 p.m. So, that is the law of the land in Georgia as of right now.
I'm just curious if that was just somehow drafted in ignorance, or that someone who wrote that wasn't aware that people vote between 7 and 7. But that does seem like a perplexing. I mean, certainly if you show up at 6:30 to vote, folks are going to let you in ahead of the. I don't know. To me, that seems a little perplexing.
I mean, I would think so, and I haven't necessarily heard of people who have been denied their right to go, in the front of the line and outside of those hours. But I wouldn't put it past anyone for that to happen. And I think when we talk about voter suppression, it is voter suppression is both sometimes ignorance and sometimes malfeasance, and sometimes a little bit of both. And so, whether it was intentional or not, it is still it is still a way to stop people from voting.
Two more things I want to ask you about. Governor Kemp drawing a line, putting his foot down, no Medicaid expansion while he's governor. Your thoughts on that?
It's disgusting and absurd, and Medicaid expansion is a wildly popular policy. It is clearly, he has tried to do his limited expansion with work requirements, and it's failed abysmally with just so few people actually enrolling in Medicaid. with work requirements. And so I think if he wants to, if he has his sights set on president, it would behoove him to expand Medicaid to everyone so they have health care. Like that would be a great way for him to get more people on his side and get more voters. But I think it has to do with Obama, and it has to do with just the politicization of our healthcare. And so I think it's absurd and sad and really enraging, especially as we see more red states expanding Medicaid. It doesn't make any sense. It's leaving money on the table. It's leaving jobs on the table. It's just a bad policy decision.
You're the second person this week to talk about Brian Kemp running for president and not U.S. Senate. It's like y'all know something that I don't know. I mean, maybe that's the case. I don't know. He talks about sitting on his tractor for a couple of years too, so maybe that's what you're picking up on. I don't know.
I hope he sits on his tractor for a couple of years or longer.
yeah, for a few decades. We're with Dom Kelly, the CEO of New Disabled South, New Disabled South Rising. All right, so my last question is, and I feel like this is an access question as well. There's been a lot of talk and a lot of backtracking, it seems, when it comes to discussion of Beltline Rail and the extension of the Atlanta streetcar to join the Beltline. And I'm curious if you have a position on that or any thoughts, because it seems like Mayor Andre Dickens is kind of walking back this vision that Ryan Gravel had long, long ago when he birthed the Beltline from a concept to a dissertation or a student project to a reality. And now it seems like there's a walk back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it looks like there is. I mean, I think the Beltline Rail is a great idea. It is a great way to ensure that more people have access. Actually, my wife and I are big fans of Muchacho, and we were really sad to see that Muchacho was against the Beltline Rail. And I don't know what he's thinking. I don't know what business or financial interests are involved here, but I think it would be an incredible way to expand access. Our transportation system in Atlanta is terrible, very inaccessible. And I think it's just a good plan that unfortunately there's probably political and financial reasons why he's walking it back. I think it's a bad idea for him to walk it back. I think it's a good idea to have a Beltline Rail, and I hope that we can actually make that happen.
It seems like a short-sighted, short-term issue of financial hardship for any of these businesses to have whatever rail construction is going to be happening alongside them. But in the long term, again, on a cold and or windy and or rainy day, nobody's on the Beltline. And the rail would sort of ensure that there would actually still be people utilizing the Beltline to get to and from these businesses.
Yep, absolutely, and that's exactly right. I think the short-sightedness is the issue, and I'm hopeful we can think long-term about how this will help not just the economy and not just our businesses, but ensure that like Atlanta residents can get around better, that they can go out and enjoy themselves, and like this will have so many positive implications. And so I think it is short-sightedness right now. Yeah.
Dom Kelly, CEO and founder of New Disabled South and New Disabled South Rising, joining us today to discuss all sorts of matters. I thank you for giving me the time, and I pulled you away from time with your daughter Mahalia, who obviously wants some attention. So I'm going to let you get back to that and get back to your day and weekend. Thank you so much for joining the Ron Show today.
Thanks for having me.
It's a heady and busy show, and I don't even have an opportunity to complain about the Atlanta Falcons drafting a quarterback with the 8th overall pick in the NFL draft. I like Michael Penix, but not at 8. Oh, my gosh. Anyway, that'll do it for the Ron Show for the day and the week and weekend. Show notes at ronshowatl.com. We air weekdays 9 to 10 a.m., replay 5 to 6 p.m. on the America One Radio app and at AmericaOneRadio.com and on demand at ProgressiveVoices.com. Also available wherever you podcast. Have a great weekend. We'll see you Monday.